Hello, today we're going to be talking about slope. Please make sure you take notes as you go and that you're answering the questions that pop up as you work through them. So what is slope? Well, slope is a ratio that describes both the direction. In other words, it's telling us which way the line goes. Is it heading upwards from left to right, or is it heading downwards from left to right? And the steepness of a line. So how the line is angled. Is it going to be going straight up really hard for us to like walk up a hill, or is it going to be really easy for us? So ways to say slope. You probably have heard it as rise over run. You can think of it as a rate of change. The letter M is used to represent it, and the change in y over the change in x. So today we are going to be focusing on how to calculate slope, and that's all. So let's first start with slopes from a graph. The way we want to think about it is the ratio of rise over run. So in this graph here, if you're given a graph, you want to identify 2 points. So you're looking for where it's a lattice point, meaning it crosses nicely in the corner. So I'm going to put at least 2 points somewhere on my graph. Now these are the only ones that appear on the picture that is given. So those are the ones I'm going to use. And now we're going to identify my rise and my run. So I'm going to start down here at this point. I'm going to figure out, well, how far am I heading in this upwards direction? So I'm going up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So my values are increasing by 5. And then I want to say, well, how far am I moving to the right? Well, if I look, I'm going over 1, 2, 3. So my values are increasing by 3. So see how I'm using the positive 5 and positive 3? So like I said, we're going to use it as rise over run. So the rise in the upwards direction is a positive 5, and the run was left to right as 3. So our slope of this graph is m equals 5/3. Let's do one more. So again, I'm going to identify 2 points. So I found that this was a nice one to use as well as this one. Now when I do this one, I'm heading in a downwards direction. So when I do that, I make up for it by using a negative sign. Going down 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then to the right 3. And so our slope for this, again, thinking of rise over run, would be -4/3. And so our slope is -4/3. Why don't you go ahead and hit the pause button and try. The correct answer to this was 3/1. Or you can say just 3. So now let's take a look at from a table. We already know that the slope is rise over run. And so what you have to think about it is change. So the slope is the change in y over the change in x. And we use this symbol here, it looks like a triangle, it's called delta, is how we show it without using all the words. So that's what we want to identify. What's the change in y and the change in x? And so if you think about it, all those points that we identify is we can create a table of values with them. So -4/1 can create that table that you're seeing over here as it's changing. And so what we saw before is we were looking at the upwards and over movement. And so I see that every instance here I'm going up 1, and then that's the up and down movement. We're looking at our y-axis. And so if you look at the y values, you see how they're changing by 1. So we see that +1 +1 the whole table. And then if I look at my left to right movement or my runs, I see that I'm going over 2 spots. Well, if you look at your x values, they're also doing something like that as well. So if you look at the change in the tables, it's going +2, +2, +2, +2. Well, remember, it's the change in y over the change in x. So the way the y values are changing are by adding 1 every time. So I know that 1 is going to be at the top of my fraction. And then the x values are changing by 2 every time, so that's going to be in the denominator of my fraction. So the slope of this is 1/2. Let's try another one, same deal. So what I see here is if I had a table of values, which would be essentially the points on this graph, and if I just look at how the y values are changing from number to number. So I can see that the y values from -2 to -5 decrease by 3. And if I look at the x values, they're increasing by 2. And again, remember, it's the change in y over the change in x. And so my fraction will be -3/2. Go ahead and pause and try this problem here. Okay, let's see how you did. The correct answer for the first one was 7/5, and the correct answer for the second one was -3/2. Last thing we want to do is slope from 2 points. We have a formula that we're going to use. It's y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. This needs to be memorized. It will not be given to you. So let's do an example with that, keeping in mind the slope formula here. So I have the point -9, 4 and -11, 1. I'm going to identify one point as x1, y1, and I'm going to identify a second point as x2, y2. I'm going to take those values and substitute them into my slope formula. So when I subtract the y's, up top will be 1 minus 4, and at the bottom will be negative 11 minus negative 9. These two negatives here in the denominator of the fraction make it a plus 9. So when I simplify that, I end up with negative 3 over negative 2, which is two negatives, so essentially I have a positive 3 halves. So the slope of the line is 3 halves. Now I could have switched these numbers around and done 4 first, but I need to make sure I put negative 9 first. Go ahead and hit the pause button and try this problem. Okay, so the correct answer was 2. So overall, we can find slopes from graphs, tables, or 2 points. Keep in mind it is a ratio that's comparing the change in y over the change in x. And most importantly, you need to memorize your slope formula.